Hello, Mason Storm here. On today's episode, we're going to look at making one of my favorite soups. It's also very simple to make and quite delicious. It is potato leek soup. So let's get started. To begin with, we get leeks, celery, and potatoes and some type of broth. I'm going to be using beef broth in this case. I had lots of it on hand. Normally I would probably use either chicken or vegetable. If you want to go full-blown vegan, just use vegetable stock and you can make an entire vegan soup out of this. To begin with, we're going to start separating our celery and get rid of all the leafy stuff in there we don't want, and then we're going to slice this into chunks. Now I'm going to be blending this with an immersion blender later to make everything all small and uniform and soup-like. So if you don't have an immersion blender and you don't have a food processor, I suggest cutting everything really small and you can somewhat approximate the same effect. Now I have a large bowl here that I'm going to be cutting the leeks into. Now leeks, I know a lot of people haven't worked with them before, so I'll explain a few things. So you don't really want to eat the tip and the leaves on the end that are all like dry and hard. You don't really want to eat those either. Now the thing with leeks is that they're grown in a very sandy soil, so it's really hard to get them clean. So the purpose of the great big bowl that I have there, it's way bigger than what you would think you would need just to hold them. And we're actually going to be doing the water separation purification method. And it's become my personal favorite way to work with leeks to get rid of all the dirt that's left inside of them. Leeks are very similar to other onions. Leek is itself a type of onion. So it's got a bunch of layers in it. So we cut it long ways and then that separates all the layers and exposes it because that breaks the ring aspect, and then we cut it into chunks. And then we have nice little pieces of leek that we're going to be able to clean in the water. Okay, now we're just going to start peeling our potatoes. Again, like in the previous video, I don't know where my potato peeler went. I swear I have one. But at least I got nice big potatoes, and these are a lot easier to peel regardless. So in a second I'll be done with those, and I can proceed to chopping them up. We're going to try to cube our potatoes. Now I'm going to show two different methods of doing this. One is the long cut, stack, cross cut method, and the other one is the I don't know if there's a name for it, but anyway, in this technique I stack them into a couple slices of potato, run a couple cuts one way, turn it 90 degrees, a couple more cuts, and then I'm left with some nice cubes. Works out pretty good, and it's quite fast, and it's a pretty safe way to cut, I would say. It's probably easier to do this method than it is to do the one I'm going to do after it. But as long as you have nice cubes as far as your potatoes go, you're pretty good. Same method that I used to make my home fries, so it's got its uses. And there's always situations where you need cubes of potatoes, especially in Western style cooking. Now we'll move on to our second potato here, and this technique is a little bit different. So I cut one thin layer off the bottom. I guess it's round, it's not like there's really a bottom. And then that lets it sit flat on the cutting board. And then I proceed to cut it into nice slices. And essentially it's a very similar technique, except for this time it's cut all at once, and it's far faster than the other method, in that there's less maneuvering of potato wedges into positions to get them primed for cutting. So this is more my preferred method, for speed anyway. And there we go, all our potatoes are ready, so it's time to move on to the next step. So we're now going to be cleaning our vegetables. Now we're going to start with our leeks, and we're going to be doing the immersion separation method. So what we're going to do is we're going to fill this bowl up with water. That's why we got such a big bowl to begin with. And what we're going to do is we're going to agitate the leeks, and then the dirt is going to all go into the water or sink to the bottom of the bowl. So we fill it up, and then we kind of get our hands in there, start moving things around, separate the leeks because they kind of stick all together in the little rings or whatever. And moving them around, that kind of helps with the separation process. And we're actually going to do this in multiple phases or passes. So we get our strainer out now, and then we're going to lift our leeks out and put them in the strainer, leaving behind the water and the dirt in the bowl. It takes a little while to do this, but I find this to be the best way to separate the dirt from the leeks because they're so difficult to clean. And if you don't clean them properly, you'll be eating your soup, and what you think is black pepper is actually dirt. I mean, it adds a little bit of character, but it's not really a desired result when making soup, especially if you're going to feed it to your friends and family. You don't want your friends and family eating literal dirt, so it's important to clean your leeks. And this method really is really good. And it gives you a chance to inspect each piece of leek as well as you go. And then after you're done straining, you run it all through again and rinse and repeat. And you can see here at the bottom of my bowl here, it's quite dirty now compared to when I started. And that's just the stuff that's separated from the leeks. So let's dump that down the drain. And time to do it again. Now I'm going to do this probably twice. I'm not going to show everything here, but I'm also going to do the same thing with the celery, seeing as I already have the great big strainer out. So let's move on to making our soup. So we got ourselves a nice big pot, and then we'll crank our temperature up to maximum. And then we'll start dumping in our vegetables. So we'll start with our leeks, and then we'll move on to our celery. There we go. And as you can see, the pot's getting pretty full. Potatoes on top. Now we're over full. This is okay though, because this is going to cook down and it's not going to take up as much space, but it's something to be aware of. And of course, I'm going to start loading up on the broth now. I'm going to put the 2 bottles of the beef broth in. That's not enough liquids, but it's enough to get us started anyway. Okay, now we're going to wait about 20 minutes or so. Although I've accelerated the video at this point a factor of 60, so it's pretty darn quick now. And then we're going to add some more water. So I'm going to add about another liter of water, and that should get our water level of the soup up to where we want it. So it's not quite to the top, but it's really close, and that's exactly what we want. So we're just going to keep cooking this down. I've accelerated the footage now significantly, and we're just going to cook this till it starts to boil. And then we're going to look over at our clock, and we're going to wait about 20 minutes or so. And that should be enough time for our potatoes to get nice and tender. So once that time's up, get your potato out, prick it with a fork, see if it feels tender. Then you can even eat it, and that way you can double check. At this time, you can lower the heat as well. Then we'll get our immersive blender out, and we'll start blending this up. Now it takes a little bit of time, and you can just keep running around in circles, and eventually it'll all blend in. It's not the most difficult thing to blend, but if your motor starts overheating, just take a little bit of a break and give it a couple minutes, and blend it some more, and eventually it'll all cream out. And once you think you've got it all blended, blend it a couple more minutes. That way you make sure that all the big chunks are gone, because you don't want to have big lumps of stuff in your nice pureed soup. So just words of wisdom there. And going back to our potatoes, you really want to make sure that they're tender enough. I've done it where I haven't cooked the potatoes enough, and I figured I'd just keep cooking the soup. But if you blend it before the potatoes are ready, you get kind of this chalkiness, and it's kind of disgusting. So try to cook your potatoes before you blend it. Okay, now for our additives. We got salt and pepper, cream, and hot sauce. This is the heavy cream, which is the good stuff, and I just have regular old Frank's. So now what we're going to do is we're going to add these things into our soup. You can also let your soup cook down at this point if you want to reduce the moisture content, and just kind of let it boil away for like 20 minutes or something, and you can start to experience the true heartiness of the potato leek soup. So the technique I like to use is you add a little bit at a time, you stir it, you get your spoon out, you give it a little bit of a taste, and then you add accordingly, because you can never take stuff out after you've added it to the soup. So it's best to kind of work your way up to the level of perfection. And I just poured in a little bit of Frank's in there. That gives a little bit more zing. So it's just a fine-tuning process. But before you know it, your soup will be ready. Other things to note is that if you don't have an immersive blender, you can also use a normal blender and just do it in batches, pour some in, blend it up. Same with a food processor. There's a lot of different devices that can do the same thing in the kitchen. I don't really know what there is to do by hand, but oh well. And then once your soup's done, spoon it out into a nice bowl, and then you can have it with sour cream and cheese like I did here. Maybe a little bit of chives on top or some parsley just to give it a little bit more of a flair. But it's delicious either way. So that's the end of this one. So let me know in the comments below how you make your potato leek soup. And if you liked my content and would like to see more of it, please like and subscribe. And until next time, stay awesome.